Hey Alok, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing awesome, Alok.
I love your background.
Thank you.
Hi,
I
Fantastic.
love
Raghu.
yours too. Hi Sanjay, nice meeting you.
Am I the only person as a marketer who doesn't have any branding going on here?
Sanjay, you don't need one. That's the thing.
Yeah, and that's a great background, absolutely. I think if you're doing good in marketing, you end up in places like that. So awesome.
Great. So, guys, we already have quite a few participants and it's going up. But in the interest of time, I am going to begin with a quick background. And my apologies to a lot of the listeners and attendees that we changed the format last time for a specific reason when we were covering Slintle. But we are back to our normal format in the 19th edition of SaaS Talks today. Just to give context, this, as I've always maintained, this is not a webinar. This is not only a panel. It is actually meant to be genuinely a discussion. And what I mean by that is that ideally we had envisioned this to be around the table kind of a format where we pick a topic which is a functional topic. It is not meant to be a rags to riches story that Raghu was such a small thing and today he is such a big thing. No, that's not the intent of these discussions. We are picking a functional topic so that it can help you what to do on Monday morning with that topic if you need to. That's the intent behind these. We've done quite a few of these across many different topics. The first 10 to 12 minutes I dominate, which is I get to ask questions as a host. And thereafter, we open it to everyone. And I know that lots of SaaS entrepreneurs are on the call today. Lots of marketers are on the call today. If some of you actually have a lot of experience in this space, please don't be shy. You can raise your hand. You can actually also be part of the on-screen. It is meant to be an open discussion. Post that anybody can ask a question. Anybody can answer a question. That's how it's meant to be. In each of these sessions, we always have a couple of anchors, and I'm going to introduce the two for you today. But before that, let me introduce the topic first. At least in the days that I have sold software, customer marketing was not actually a pretty big deal. Why? Because at least I grew up in the era of selling software for SAP. Once you have sold the software, customer has no choice but to pay you 22% maintenance every year. And guess what? Whether they implement the software, they don't implement, I don't care, right? I get the money regardless. I've recognized my revenue. I'm done, right? As you look at the beat of most SaaS companies, and we typically come in very, very early in companies, 100% is from new customers. But you trace that path over a period of time, gradually you begin to see that a lot of your revenue, in fact, is coming from, and I mean new revenue, is coming from existing customers as opposed to new customers. I believe that number for Salesforce is about 85%, right? Which means that a staggering amount of money is coming from existing customers. I mean new money from existing customers. And therefore, while we all think of demand generation or marketing when it comes to new prospects, but what do we do from a marketing perspective with existing customers? And lots of different terms have been used in the industry for this beat, but intent was to cover this topic comprehensively on the call today. And with that, let me introduce two speakers for today. I'm going to begin with Sanjay. Interestingly, every month I find one new connect with Sanjay these days. But Sanjay is the Chief Marketing Officer of Chargebee, which I highly regard as one of the best SaaS companies that India has created. Interestingly, I've known Sanjay for now more than 20 years, or roughly 20 years. It goes a long back. And have known Sanjay more as a human being and someone who has helped me a lot in the past. Sanjay has had leadership positions in Microsoft, in Box, and then of course, more recently in Chargebee. Welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you. Thanks, Alok. Thanks for that kind introduction.
And also want to welcome Raghu. Raghu is the founder and CEO of Yellow.ai. Many of you might know of Yellow as Yellow Messenger in the past. They have also been in the use for the kind of investors that they have onboarded in the recent past as well. But Raghu and his team have done a fabulous job of building Yellow.ai as one of the behemoths in the conversational AI space broadly. Interestingly, Raghu, you might not know this, but we share a similar background from an EDA background. Raghu used to work at Texas Instruments, at Magma Design / Synopsys, and Broadcom, and then eventually before he started Yellow.ai. So thank you both for joining the conversation today.
Thank you very much, Alok. Great to be here, and great to see that we have a common background. We'll look it up and see where the dots connect, but good to know.
Fantastic. So let me begin with Sanjay. Sanjay, you have led marketing and been in senior positions across very many different places. But and feel free to answer what part you can, what part you can't. That's also okay. But ChargeBee today is one of the more scaled up SaaS companies from India, right? And while I was making up numbers on my own in terms of what Salesforce was, etc., from a context perspective, as people interpret your comments later on in the discussion, even if you can give some ballpark of what percentage of your new revenue comes from existing customers, and if it has changed over the last couple of years or not, I think will be very useful context for the listeners.
Yep, no, happy to do that, and thanks. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me to join this discussion. And you're absolutely right. Given the audience, I'd actually love to learn from the discussion as well. So please chime in and add to what all three of us say. We at ChargeBee, I would say, are still in very early stages of what is an extremely, what I've learned since the time I've been here, very rapidly expanding market. And as you know, our target market also includes small businesses, lots of startups, where just the sheer numbers are huge. Thousands of new startups and SMBs get created every year. There's always this shuffle. People are moving up from being a startup to a scale-up company. We are also moving up market. So we've actually expanded our focus to include more larger enterprises as well. So that's why our TAM has been growing. I'd say because of that, we are probably a little bit different than a Salesforce, which is much more mature company. Our business actually, I would say at this time, comes as much from new logos, in fact, more from new logos, as it does from existing customers. That said, existing customer revenue extremely important for us, also growing rapidly. One of the things we pride ourselves and have been very fortunate about is the fact that we have a very healthy net retention rate. We're upwards of 140, which is considered among the best in class, definitely in the 90+ percentile in the industry. And the last thing I'd say is that because we have a pretty good freemium model that is designed to attract new businesses. So if I'm a startup just starting out with a new subscription business, I can use ChargeBee for free for my billing, subscription management, up to I get to a business which is about $100,000 in ARR, which then also, as you can see, gives us this opportunity to bring in lots of new customers into the mix, which is why I go back to my first point that ours is still a mix that is skewed towards new logos.
Understand. And Raghu, actually I have the same question for you, because at least my understanding is you are a very different beat. You have very large customers, right? You go to large banks, etc. And even though you are an earlier stage company compared to a ChargeBee, how does this match look for you?
Yeah, I think my comments wouldn't be too different from what Sanjay indicated. When you are growing at the rates of 2x to 3x, so right now we are potentially at 3x year on year, a lot of that new revenue and new bookings come from new customers by design. And we also measure the way that we are expanding on customers using net retention revenue. And so we are the similar 150 plus range in our net retention revenue. And for us, customer marketing and the focus on expansion is primarily at increasing consumption. Ours is a directly consumption linked model, and the entire cycle of from the sales to the customer success is tightly linked into the consumption, where a lot of the consumption driven triggers are included in the original contract. So most of the increase actually happens from a success team driving adoption rather than going and selling additional components or SKUs. But just as a summary, predominantly the new revenue is driven by new customers. But the way that we measure is with a target of 150 plus NRR that we need to achieve from the existing customers.
So Raghu, I'll continue with you first. Given that you have a consumption-led model, which is relatively different, in your case, it is important that your customers are consuming essentially what you have sold to them. And you mentioned that customer success is the entity which is responsible. So as you look at either continuing revenue or even enhanced revenue from existing customers, would you say that that's the primary team that you will hold responsible, or is the one that is in a way marketing to existing customers, or are there other account management teams, ABM teams? I don't know. There are so many different buzzwords these days. Who sort of comes into picture for this for you?
Absolutely. So there are two different teams that work towards the customer post them implementing and going live. One, there's a customer success team, which is essentially drives the adoption of these enterprises. So increasing the number of conversations, increasing the number of channels, expanding from support to marketing. And we have a separate account management team, which is looking to get the customers to sign up min commits to higher numbers based on the increased adoption. So as soon as the increased adoption happens, the customers get into overages. And these overages drive additional ARRs, etc. But always the account management team is looking to convert those overages into higher committed bookings and higher committed revenues. So these two teams work hand in hand to kind of expand on the existing customers from a sales perspective and from an adoption perspective.
Interesting. Sanjay, switching to you, because yours is, as you said, you have lots of small customers, you have lots of large customers as well. And as you are building your new pipeline from existing customers, right? Who is responsible for that within your charge-B structure? And I'm curious how this all gets handled.
Yeah, and you mentioned SAP, and it's interesting. When I was at Microsoft, I was there at the time, and Microsoft was going through this fundamental transition from a classic on-prem 3-year agreement type of model to a SaaS model, subscription based. And so it's very interesting to see how a company like Microsoft that didn't have CSMs eventually, and today is doing such a spectacular job. And then I moved to Box and I saw a very different model where I think CSMs were commonplace. But what I noticed, now that I've come to ChargeBee, is actually companies are very different in the way they structure who's responsible for expansion, who's responsible for renewals, who's responsible for cross-sell and upsell. Yeah. And I think that actually also causes this issue that we see in the industry, that customer marketing is what they call in software an overloaded term.
Yeah.
It means so many different things.
Yeah.
It can be about, like Raghu said, a big part of it is driving usage and adoption. But for many people, it's all about ensuring renewals and retention. And for yet others, it's about driving expansion, cross-sell, and upsell. Now, in ChargeBee's case, the pipeline focus historically, and this is changing even as the business is growing because the scale is so big now, but it used to be that the CSMs were primarily responsible for identifying opportunities within an existing customer, because they work so closely with them. They understand how best we can derive more value with some support from marketing. We're going through kind of a second evolution, in the sense that apart from going to new segments, we're going from being a single product company to being a multi-product company. Indeed. And so there's a huge opportunity for us to go back into our 3,500 paying customers and cross-selling and upselling new value add that we know that they can get value from. And so marketing can play a much bigger role for that kind of scale. And we're continuing to add customers every day. So marketing is going to play a bigger role in creating pipeline by talking about new products, add-on value to existing customers. What's interesting, the way we do it is probably similar to what Raghu said. The CSMs have responsibility for creating some pipeline, but then we have a separate set of roles within CS that are considered account managers that actually focus more on transacting that expansion or transacting the add-on sale.
Got it. Got it. I do have one more question, but I also realize that my time is up and people have already started posting. So one request, actually two requests to people. Please do post your questions on the Q&A panel, not on the chat panel, because I will not be able to look at multiple panels together. Number two, as I said, I know so many of you actually have a lot of experience in this topic. So please don't be shy. Feel free to actually come onto the screen here. And you can ask questions. You can also answer questions there as you sort of come online. But let me pick up a question from Abhijit Tannu first. And it is directed at Raghu, saying, Raghu, how do you ensure synergy and trust between CS and sales teams? Is it advisable to have a common leader for both? I've often seen sales leader not having a customer success mindset. In your view, are there leaders who can lead the sales as well as CS teams?
Yeah, so that's interesting, and it's a common debate that we have in the company as well. So the way that we kind of structured this is that they have more aligned incentives. The sales team is the account management, which sits under the sales team, is incentivized towards closing the upgrades and closing the higher bookings, whereas the CSM team is primarily driven by the net retention revenue. That's so for the cohort of customers, their primary target is getting to the net retention revenue. And we have one single leader that kind of helps coordinate across both of this. And right now that is the CSM leader, because we feel that that is the primary trigger for closing out the transactions. Because if you're not increasing the consumption in our business, you can go and close, but you will definitely churn out in the next 1 year. So the success is directly linked to the consumption, and that leader helps coordinate across both of this. And the quota goals of closing with the existing customer, it rolls into the overall quota and quarterly targets. So right now the teams are pretty well aligned, I would say, in how they work together. But I think both the leaders collaborating is a significant requirement or underlying pin for this.
So I'm actually going to add a question to that for Sanjay. You know, while Raghu was talking about NRR, and I guess given that it's a consumption-led model, and I'm being a younger company compared to a ChargeBee, but Sanjay, you talked about cross-sell versus expansion in your talk track, right? So, and I'm taking a leap of faith here, which is that there is an NRR that happens because of expansion, and there is an NRR that happens because of cross-sell, right? Now, the NRR because of cross-sell, is that also a customer success function according to you? Or is that actually a marketing and a sales metric outside of CS?
Yeah, you know, I think the answer is, like many of these complex things, it depends. And I'll give you an example of why. I'll give you a reason why. You know, I've seen this happen multiple times at Microsoft, at Box, now at ChargeBee. The add-on that you're trying to sell may be a more specialized product than the base platform and require a specialist sales force, a solution specialist, a technical specialist that is, you know, more enabled and more educated about selling about that domain. Right? And this becomes even more important in line of business applications, probably less so in a infrastructure product. So in that case, I would say yes, that's one reason why you would want to have somebody else other than the CSM selling this new product. The second reason, and this is a personal, you know, bias that I have, and Raghu is right, you can manage it through the right compensation structure and the right incentives. But one of the things you want to avoid with CSMs is this conflict of whether their goal is to make the customer successful with what they have bought from you, which is all about usage and adoption, or should they worry about their paycheck because they have to bring in a certain amount of new revenue from new products, right? And so that tension sometimes can put the CSM in a difficult position and cause the customer to look at this person and say, are you really here for my success or not? And that's one of the things you have to manage very carefully with the CSM and the pipeline being with the CSM. Now, to your second part of the question, should marketing be involved? Absolutely. Marketing, I think, plays a huge function in all of the three. They should. And I think the industry is beginning to learn that. Not everybody does it, but they should play a big role in all three. Marketing to drive usage and adoption, marketing to create opportunities for expansion, like deepen the usage within the organization, new use cases for the same product, new user profiles for whom you solve problems. And then third, create opportunities for cross-sell and upsell.
Interesting. And in the list of three that you mentioned, Sanjay, what is it that the marketing is doing currently to expand the use cases, even of existing products? And how is marketing getting involved in that? And what kind of campaigns do you drive for that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples. Often what ends up happening is with SaaS, most SaaS companies, live and die by the land and expand model. You start with a certain work group, a certain part of the company, and then from there you say, okay, hey, I've solved that piece of it. In our case, it might be that a certain part of the company, typically the product side, is looking for a billing solution. So you go in and solve the billing solution, and that's what they use. Once they start getting that part of the under control, that part of the business under control, they realize that I also need to be able to have much better insights and sophisticated dashboards for me to be able to see what is happening with my subscribers at the tenant level, at the individual subscriber level, so that I can ensure that I'm driving successful renewals and preventing churn. That's typically the job of somebody in the CSM organization.
Yeah.
So, and then the third step is once you start getting a reasonable amount of business and start going global, you have to comply with this different, regulations and tax regimes. RevOps and finance start to get involved and say, hey, listen, I need to be able to, do the right things in automating revenue recognition, for example. And so now all of a sudden you have yet another use case that might require some additional functionality, but sometimes might even be just a different use case for the same platform. And so marketing's job is to kind of figure out these different personas, figure out the jobs to be done, and market and educate these different personas in the same account about these jobs to be done that can be done with the same platform.
Got it. I'm going to take up another question from Abhijit himself. And sorry, this is a note for the audience. There are lots of questions coming just on pure customer success, like how does a customer success manager grow, etc. That's for today, I would say off topic. So I'm not going to pick some of those up. I'm going to pick up things more which are related to marketing to existing customers. So Abhijit Tanu's question is, when you market to existing customers, is there a difference in the way you run those campaigns? Because there is already some existing context to these customers, both that they know you and also because you know a lot about them as well as you're going to them. So how do you take that into account while running a campaign? And how do you also glean information from CS while marketing is running that campaign as well?
Yep. Do you want me to start with that? Or
either of you, whoever wants to pick it up, please go ahead.
I'll give a brief answer, and Raghu, feel free to add. But again, multiple strategies to do this. But I think the key point that you pointed out in the question was you have the luxury of getting insights from the CSMs. And if there's a way for you to collect that, aggregate that, and say, here's a segment of customers that have used the product, like I said, in one use case, and we have the opportunity, and it's a repeatable scenario. That insight is actually quite helpful because then you can tailor the content that you're creating, that you're sending to them, the webinars that you're creating and inviting them to, can be tailored to the other use cases where you think there's an opportunity to drive expansion, rather than doing something that's generic and rolled out to everybody. So having that sort of insight, and sometimes you get that from CSMs. Often in the case of SaaS, you're able to actually discern that from product analytics. You should be able to say what people are using, what features people are using, what capabilities they have enabled or activated, and you can tailor your marketing based on that. And it's actually a very powerful thing to do if you can segment your customers that way, because you can make some pretty astute decisions on how much money you want to spend engaging with those customers based on what's the potential for deepening the penetration within that customer segment or that set of customers.
Actually, I may also, Raghu, please go ahead first.
Go ahead, Alok.
No, please.
Yeah, sure. So I think from our side, a few examples in real life, right? So we see that customers adopting a particular channel. So they are live on a website, mobile app, and now you have this Instagram messaging, WhatsApp open up. And you kind of see that all these customers can be targeted to drive consumption by adopting new channels. And we see this entire flow as different touch points. One is digital, and we implement Gainsight. So there's a lot of data on each customer that's kind of recorded there. So that information can flow into the marketing, and there's like a digital campaign on accounts that are not on WhatsApp on how they can expand the platform usage to WhatsApp. And then you kind of expand from digital to more touch centric, where you invite those customers for webinar on how you can use voice, how you can use WhatsApp to drive commerce. Then you get customers who are on customer support. You kind of invite them into webinars on how conversations can be used for commerce per se. So you're kind of expanding on use case. So we kind of look at it on digital touch points and also incentive structures for sales teams. So we have specific campaigns where we're launching a new channel. The sales team gets added incentives to work with marketing and kind of drive the adoption of new channels or new use cases. So broadly, that covers.
Actually, Raghu, then I have a curiosity question for you on this one then, which is that, very typically when we think of marketing funnel, we think of those that we sent an email to, number of percentage that clicked, percentage that came to my site, those who downloaded a white paper, then those who registered for a webinar, those who became a qualified opportunity, eventually closed, right? So, and we all pay so much attention to that funnel. But what you're describing is a new kind of funnel as well.
Yeah.
I'm an existing customer. I'm using my chat capability. But guess what? I have a new channel, invoice as well. So do you build newer funnels which begin with an existing customer itself, but existing customer being led to new use cases or products? And who takes care of those funnels now? And what does that journey look? Who's mapping those journeys for you?
Yeah, sure. I think we are midway into that maturity cycle, but this is run like a separate. So the entire company is divided into multiple P&Ls per se, and there is one team that drives just the expansion, profit and loss kind of account, right? And that team manages this entire funnel on how many expansion opportunities are being created per quarter and what is the closure on those, and of course, the marketing also plays as one of the demand sources into that funnel.
Got it. I was just going to add one more comment, and I know lots of comments on one question that have come in, but and relating to my SAP days, and of course, we didn't have marketing tools like people have today, like account-based marketing, etc., all those things. But for a lot of cross-sell, and we had probably 2,000 to 3,000 products on our price list. So it was a massive sort of set of SKUs. But there were lots of products that were being targeted, for example, to the supply chain persona. A lot of products being targeted to the finance persona. A lot of products being targeted to the HR persona. And what we created were also solution marketing functions for each of these different lines of businesses, because just the context and the content for each of these is very different. And to the previous question that Abhijit asked, that how do you take into account the fact that you already know this customer? How are you taking that into account in your marketing? Is that we segregated accounts into multiple tiers. So we had these top 40 accounts in the country that we used to call the strategic accounts. Now in those, we are not going to just randomly bombard them with random messages. We will go through an account planning exercise. Out of that account planning exercise, we'll come back with an answer saying that, look, these are the 20 new things I think we can sell to them. These are, by the way, the personas or the individuals who we need to target. And it'll be very much a one-to-one mapping. And then gradually from these strategic accounts, you go all the way into territorial accounts. Now, territorial accounts have to be a bit mass approach. It's just harder to personalize your knowledge of the customers in the messaging that you're sending out. Becomes, at least it was harder because we didn't have any tool set to be able to take care of it. But we also found that sometimes if your cross-sell bag is large enough, you can actually sometimes have a solution marketing approach for different solutions as well. My God, lots of questions. I think I'm going to pick up a question from Imad, which is, what are the new innovative channels or programs that you're seeing across the globe that can be included in customer marketing program for a company apart from the events, webinars, case studies across different channels that are radically different, especially to engage and keep the momentum? I don't know, either of you who want to take this question.
I can take that actually.
Sure.
And I think we are also trying to drive this is, I think PLG for expansion, I think is a phenomenal channel. So using your product to drive growth within the company. For us, I mean, it's a fairly straightforward to kind of implement, right? I mean, somebody is using, again, as a channel, as a use case, and the product itself drives inputs to the users on why are not expanding to a certain specific use case. Hey, we are seeing that a lot of your customers are asking for commerce related stuff. You want to kind of add those journeys, add those users. So I think if I kind of summarize that, I feel that there's a great opportunity for product-led, growth-driven expansion or marketing to existing customers.
Interesting. That's a pretty interesting comment. I have a question on tool set as I was bringing it up for both of you. You know, over the last few years, we have seen this massive growth of account-based marketing tools as well. And I know they're used for new target accounts as well. Mm-hmm. They are used a lot for existing customers as well. And there are different examples, demand-based, Sixth Sense, Terminus, etc. I'm curious if either of you actually use any of these tools or equivalents. And how specifically have you seen the effectiveness of these tools, particularly in the realm of your existing customers?
Yeah, I can go first. So, you know, I'll give you an answer that's actually both experience at ChargeBee, but which is, I would say at ChargeBee, we're relatively early in using ABM. And ABM is another one of those terms that is so heavily overused.
Yeah.
ABM can be the kind of thing that, Alok, you described that you were doing at SAP, which was really curated content in a very structured engagement of a set of people and contacts within a small number of accounts, where you can really tailor and personalize every communication, right? All the way to people are calling what used to be just regular targeted marketing, people are beginning to call ABM. And so we have to be a little bit careful when people talk about that. Now, technology makes it easier to do some level of personalization at scale.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to say that you can, just automatically personalize things for thousands of customers. I mean, at some point it becomes a little bit of an oxymoron. That said, we've at ChargeBee used tools. Our team's approach, and I've come into this late, but just looking at them, they've been really successful because we have a very, very successful overall, both inbound and this at scale outbound engine. They've used more of a point solution approach, because what we found is for the sophistication that we wanted in a particular area, those point solutions were better. Now, that said, I've been in other places like at Box, where we did use one of the ones that you mentioned, like Sixth Sense. I'm very familiar with Sixth Sense, which does an incredible job of doing what they call the deep funnel, or the dark funnel, where they do a great job of helping you capture intent. So people are not yet hand raisers, but you're able to do at scale ABM and capture people in a fashion that we at ChargeBee call mid-intent. They're not quite ready necessarily to buy today, but they're beginning to search. How can you start engaging with them? The tools like that are actually quite effective for two reasons. One, because they let you do this mining of what people are doing on the web, even if on your site, on the web, without you actually having their contact, number one. Second, it gives you the opportunity to do it at scale, whereas the other methods, like I said, tend to be very, very laborious because they're manual.
Got it. Got it. I'm going to pick up a question from Ashwini Vaidya on the Q&A panel. And by the way, if some of you want to raise your hands and ask the question in person here, please feel free to do that as well. So the question from Ashwini is that, what is your thought on online communities and how do they tie into this? And I'm actually going to add to his question, which is that I know that pretty much all large software companies used to build customer groups, user groups as well, right? And that used to be one of the primary vehicles, not only of engaging existing customers, but also marketing to them as well. Of course, they were not online. Today, these are online communities, and want to understand that, have either of you experimented with building these online customer user groups? What do you use it for? Who manages these? And where does this function actually report into?
I can take that. Again, fairly early into the journey, but I think some of the things that we are pretty excited and these are kind of going on the roll is one. We have one is from a product PLG kind of perspective, right, where you create these online groups and stuff. We are quite early in that, but what we have done is we have created hackathons on the platform that include developers from existing companies and even the new potential targets, and they kind of come out and show what can be built on top of the platform, which essentially cross-pollinates some of the use cases across the existing customer base. The second community which we are trying to build and we are super excited is we are launching a program called Golden Circle, where we are building a community of some of the best users of our platform and management from those companies, which are essentially becoming evangelists of the software and evangelists of these platforms. And the plan is that we are organizing some of these retreats for these folks and essentially build a community of people who can talk about this entire concept of conversational AI, but also on our specific platform. So you kind of build evangelists at scale. So we're still to see the results, but we are very excited about how that program can deliver growth.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think those are actually very effective ways of doing it. The thing that we experimented with, and I'm actually now trying to bring it to ChargeBee as well, that was a little bit counterintuitive that most people don't do. You usually do user groups for two reasons. You do user groups because it's a community support group. Yeah. Is one reason. The other reason is to do truly build a user group. The challenge with communities, online or otherwise, is always building it. You can't just magically overnight say, I'm going to have a community. You have to build it, and it takes time. Yeah. The counterpoint, not the counter, the controversial thing that I was going to talk about is often people think about these user groups of customers and they restrict it to existing customers because they're always worried that if they bring in or allow a prospect to be in it, what if the prospect, before they've made a purchase decision, sees a discussion about a problem with the product? Yeah. And I actually think that allowing that, and we tried it in a couple of places, and it was magical. It was like amazing because it gives you a level of credibility with the prospect and a level of transparency, which they really appreciate. Yes, there's some risk, but the part of that what I found really appealing was the value that both these prospects, and because existing customers were enlightened about new types of problems that they had not yet experienced, that this prospect was asking about, and the prospect was getting, it's a little bit like G2 reviews or customer reviews online. You trust social proof much more than anything else. And so that's an unusual use of user groups that I think is actually quite powerful.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I have another question on that then. Are there any software tools that you are using to build communities as well?
We have just started evaluating a couple,
Okay.
and I would say they are community, but the focus of these is a little bit more skewed towards building a customer advocacy community.
Understood.
Similar to what Raghu was describing, where
Right.
you're with the program that he's building. But ours is designed to be online, not necessarily physical. We are beginning to evaluate, so we haven't yet deployed anything yet. A lot of the community tools that are there today are much more classic. These tend to be a little bit more high touch from a software perspective. And the idea is to truly build advocates and networks of advocates who will then in turn invite more people into the fold.
Got it. Got it. I'm going to pick a question from Gautam Singh Deo. And his question, I have never thought about this one.
Yeah.
Have you explored any gamification techniques for customer success marketing? Any success stories will help. That's the question. I don't know if either of you want to take it or have experience in this.
Oh, I don't have much of experience in this, Amit.
Yeah, we're interesting to hear from the audience if anybody else has had.
If anybody else in the audience knows or has experimented, and Gautam, since you asked the question, in case you have experience with this as well, feel free to just raise your hand and we will sort of bring you on screen. In the meantime, I'm going to pick up another question from Abhijit Tannu. And Abhijit, thanks for asking a lot of very pointed questions today. The question is, I think both of you talked about account marketing, account farming, and Raghu, in your talk track, I know you also talked about the fact that you are using Gainsight for customer success. The question is that, do these customer success platforms help you in account marketing and account farming? Or are there any adjacent tools that you need actually for cross-selling, farming, account marketing, whatever words you want to use? What has your experience been?
Yeah, so I think we try to limit the number of tools that we use. We want to kind of create a network of SaaS tools within the company. But I think for us, I think we just kind of kept it simple. Gainsight just gives a clear metric of where the customers are, and that can easily feed back into Salesforce, right? So Salesforce feeds into what kind of opportunities can this create for that specific account, and new opportunities are created from that. So we don't use tools between them. And it's just an integration between Salesforce and Gainsight that helps track this.
Any thoughts from you, Sanjay, on this?
In my experience, I think a lot of those tools tend to be used, and that's the way we use them, a little bit more focused on managing the renewal and the retention piece of it. New opportunity farming or identification typically goes through more traditional, CRM, and the same market, like I said, from a marketing standpoint, you end up not necessarily looking. You may get the data from those systems in terms of who is where in their adoption, but then you try to ingest it into whatever is your marketing automation system, marketing database to be able to conduct your things. That's usually what I've seen happen. But to be fair, that is something that is just the whole notion of expansion marketing is relatively new at ChargeBee.
Got it. Brings me to another tactic, at least that I've seen in the past. And there are a couple of people who have asked questions around that, though not exactly. But at least, and again, I'm going back to my era of SAP days here, that one of the big things in terms of marketing to existing customers actually used to be the annual customer event that we would do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pretty big deal. I know lots of companies, Salesforce will be doing a Dreamforce, etc. We used to do something called a Sapphire. But it was actually a pretty big deal where we will get all the executives, we'll get all the product owners, we will get senior executives from our customers in there as well. And that was a very critical piece of the marketing armory, if you would, in influencing these senior stakeholders with what new forms of value we can bring to you. And sometimes use that to initiate a new sales cycle, hopefully, or sometimes even to close an existing one, right?
Right.
And want to understand if either of you have experimented with these in the past or not, and how effective these have been.
We did definitely experiment, and I think we are building that probably. We have something called an Envision, which is right now a virtual event, but hopefully it gets into a physical event format later. And that just invites all the customers, the new prospects, and it's a 2 to 3 day event that runs multiple product-driven, customer-driven webinars or multiple event kind of format, and we have seen that to be very, very effective. It's just the first event where even I think we were not as mature in running those events, generated a pretty good number of opportunities that we went about and closed. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. Both, again, I'll give you two examples. At Box does something called BoxWorks, which is actually a really well-run, very exciting event that has initially used to be just existing customers and slowly started broadening into, well, as you described, Alok. We found it was a very, very effective way to accelerate a deal in the pipeline, to close, and in many cases to actually get to break through a new prospect where the account team was unable to get a meeting, and this actually opened the doors. So it was effective. At ChargeBee, we've been doing two types of events, and since I've been here, I think it's all been virtual so far. And I'll tell you, the only downside I've seen of those so far, they're very, very effective. Customers love them. We have focused them. We call them user conferences. We've done, in fact, we just finished the most recent one in Europe, in Amsterdam last week. And it's designed for a mix of existing customers as well as prospects. We did one in the US in June, very similar format. This time in Europe, we did 2 tracks, and there's a mix of strategic topics, change management topics, industry trends, and then very practitioner oriented topics. So you're able to meet the needs of both types of personas. So they are very effective, even virtually, because actually people have more flexibility to attend what they want to attend, maybe not be able to stay for the whole event. The downside is, I used to find in physical events, you could do these things where you set up side meetings, where you can actually have executives meeting with the customer, bring in a product manager to talk about a specific product roadmap. That is harder to orchestrate and arrange in a virtual setting. Not impossible, but is a little bit more difficult to orchestrate that.
Indeed.
And so you miss that opportunity.
Indeed. I think I would also imagine that in fact, it was going to be one of my questions, that in the COVID world, as these events have moved online, is one able to achieve that purpose or not? I'm going to pick a question from Abhijit Tannu, even though it's not specifically on marketing, but given that it is related to new revenue from existing customers, I'm sure both of you in your organizations have experimented with this. Is it usually a better idea to have a separate sales team for farming versus hunting? Or would you actually keep a single sales team?
We have a separate sales team.
Got it. And at what stage of the evolution of the company did you separate them?
That's a good question. So I think it is when I think we were pretty much well staffed and going on from new logo acquisition perspective, that we had enough capacity. And then I think we expanded into creating multiple ways of expanding into the existing. That's when we created a separate account team. When we actually hit the problem of salespeople having a dilemma of focusing on existing accounts versus new accounts.
Understand. No, that's a fair answer. Sanjay, I want to go back to one other thing you mentioned, which is, I guess, very interesting about ChargeBee, that you also have a freemium motion. and I'm assuming at the lower end of the market is where that. So while we talk about large accounts, expansion, cross-sell, all those things, you have a lot of freemium customers, and I'm using the word customers because they are users in this situation. Now you also need to quote unquote market or nudge these customers to get into paid customers as well. Right? So who does that? Who's responsible for converting freemium to paid? Is there a separate team that does it, and is it purely product-led motion, or is there actually more to it as well?
Yeah. So in our case, we do have a very large set of customers, and interestingly, it is not only the very low end of the market or not just early stage startups. You can imagine a product manager in a larger company who's been told to go evaluate might sign up. Now they can't actually automate their whole process, but at least they can get a sense of what the product can do in a small way. So we do see a mix of people who sign up, but it's largely startup. We are also actually investing heavily in refining our product-led motion. And the idea is to provide a lot more in-product marketing, if you will, in the experience, so that you move people along in their usage of different features, tell them about other capabilities that they may not be aware of straight off the bat. So the product markets itself. So we are doing that. Right now, though, while that capability is built, because you're trying to also understand what's the best way to where do you get that message across? Where is it more useful and not annoying? We have a separate team called the growth team that basically takes these customers who are freemium and then helps them almost go through the early onboarding and activation process to get them up and running. This is all done virtually, all remotely. This is not like a big massive effort. A lot of it could be just pointing them at the right information, sending them the right content. So we do have a separate team that does that. At the same time, what we're doing is we're beginning to look at what can marketing do to be able to educate these people in a useful, productive way, because it can be annoying just to be bombarded by or spammed by email, which some companies tend to do when you get freemium. But what's a way that marketing can augment? Today, we don't do a lot of that. We rely either on the in-product messaging or this growth function.
Got it. Interesting. I'm taking the liberty of adding Priyank Jain to the call because, and Priyank, will be good to just get a quick introduction of you as well.
Very good morning, guys. I'm the founder of Your Space. We are SaaS for workplace, actually. We're helping any workplace to manage, market, and monetize. And we have 15 plus SaaS product in a single suite. So, all your end-to-end digitizing your workplaces can be done easily by us. So that's what we do.
Understand. Priyank, would love for you to, I know you put a comment there, but I don't think most people end up reading those comments. So you had an answer to Gautam's question earlier on gamification of CS marketing. So would love for you to answer that.
I think I was talking about the gamification. Gamification is actually one of the key things you can do it if your KPI is about active users. Because what we did in our first startup, that is the BlogPeach, location-based blogging, we help bloggers to concentrate just on writing, not technology is being taken care by us. So what we do is just to increase their activities. We have built a gamification concept based on each of the activities in the events they do in the platforms, and we incentivize on top of it. So we have different points for different systems, and this points was being converted in the offers, either in the invoicings, or we have marketplace different offers, we do it. So that's the way activities was also increasing, and gamification can play a really huge role if you wanted to increase the activity, active users in your pipeline. That was, I think, we did it, and it really worked well as well. So I can say with my experience there.
Interesting.
That's a good one.
Fantastic. If you look at marketing to existing customers, and while we use the word marketing here, but a lot of new revenue typically for larger accounts usually comes from account planning. And I'm curious, and I know that it's a function of size, your own size and size of the accounts that you target as well. And it is not something that I would say is very effectively done in most organizations, but I'm curious for either Raghu or Sanjay to answer this, whether you actually, in trying to uncover new opportunities in existing customers, is account planning a function that is run today or not? Doesn't matter who it is run by. Would love to get your thoughts if you have experimented with it and how effective it has been.
So for us, the account management team actually runs a process on for each quarter, what are the accounts to target for expansion, and they set some goals that these are the potential accounts to go for, and that is reliant on one, data from Gainsight, and second, working with the CSMs. I think there's a lot to be improved there, but that team has an effective charter of planning for each quarter on what accounts to kind of go for and what values to go for.
And is it morely from a success perspective, Raghu, or is it also from understanding newer opportunities in these accounts?
So this is from understanding new opportunities and expanding so not from success perspective. There is they kind of work across accounts and they prioritize. But from account management perspective, which is part of the sales team, there's only certain number of people and they can only go behind certain number of accounts. And they kind of figure out these are the accounts where I have a large opportunity to expand on voice. So they kind of create that opportunity and go behind those accounts specifically.
Understand. Very interesting. Very interesting. Sanjay, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a process that the CSMs run, for a certain number of the top accounts, where you do a quarterly business review with the account, and one of the outcomes of that is to understand and get some ideas of where there might be opportunity. But the other one is, and this is usually, you're right, it's a matter of scale, because it's a matter of numbers. In the end, the account teams do in fact look at some of their bigger accounts because that's likely where there's enough of an opportunity to go invest that much time. So for the larger accounts, there is a regular account planning exercise to say, in conjunction with the CSMs, where the AEs will look at it and say, okay, hey, here's a customer who's grown, or it's coming up for renewal. And usually that's the way you look at it, saying what else are they ready to use right now, given that they have gone through the first phase of using the product. But that happens, and I've seen it happen across, I'm even thinking back to my experience at Box, a very typical process, but usually for larger accounts.
Got it. Fantastic. I know that we are at the end of our hour, and we always say that we will start on time, end on time. So we are actually going to end the session for today, even though there are probably 20 more questions on the Q&A panel that we have not been able to answer. But I want to thank Sanjay and Raghu, both of you, for being there today. And Sanjay, I know you are doing a late night session for us here. So truly appreciate you doing this, joining us from Seattle.
No, absolutely. Really enjoyed being part of it. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. And thank you, everyone.